Hello, dear students. In today's class, in the previous class, we did the poem Keeping Quiet by Pablo Neruda. Today, we'll do the question answers of this poem, including NCERT questions and other extra questions, which you are going to do in your notebook. So, take out page number 95 in your book Flamingo and 96, and let me share the screen. Yes. Now, let us see what will counting up to 12 and keeping still help us achieve. It will give us a chance to introspect. The key word. If we count up to 12 and keep still, it will give us some time to analyze our deeds. I said it will give us time to think about ourselves. It will allow us some moments to think about the result of our activities. Right? People in the world are involved in wars and are also damaging the environment, and many ways their trends are wrong. So in order to achieve their aims, they damage the environment. They do many wrong deeds, including wars and violence and different types of deeds which cannot be called as or counted as right. Unfortunately, this is taking all of us towards our end. So we need to think in order to achieve peace and harmony. So counting up to 12 will give us a chance to think about ourselves and all our wrong deeds that we must stop. So do you think the poet advocates total inactivity and death? Very important question. No, the poet doesn't advocate total inactivity and death. In yesterday's class also we discussed that there are lines in the poem by the poet that I don't want any truck with death. Death here is symbolic of inactivity. He clarifies this in the poem that he wants all the people to just stop for a while in order to analyze their activities and their consequences. He wants human beings not to support war and damage to the environment. What is the sadness that the poet refers to in the poem? The sadness is the result of our own actions and deeds. As we discussed, the key word is introspection. So what we are required to introspect? We need to introspect our own deeds, our own actions. And this sadness is because of those dark deeds and actions. So the sadness is the result of our own actions and deeds. According to the poet, we all are in a hurry of achieving various tasks in our life. This rush sometimes proves dangerous for us as we don't analyze our actions. So we land ourselves in a number of problems. And these problems then become the reason for our sadness as referred to in the poem. Now, what symbol from nature does the poet invoke to say that there can be life under apparent stillness? Perhaps the earth can teach us, or perhaps the earth is the best example we discussed yesterday. The poet takes the example of earth to prove that there can be life under stillness, under apparent stillness. Now, the earth never gets inactive. We experience the change in the seasons, which brings so many different things with it. In winters, things come to a standstill. As the water bodies, they freeze, the trees shed their leaves, etc. But as soon as the spring season comes, it brings with it lovely flowers, flowing rivers, and a new life is given to nature. And the nature gives us the new life. It's interconnected. So the poet wants to convey that we should stay calm, but that doesn't mean that we should become totally inactive, right? And that doesn't mean that it will bring total inactivity and stillness in our lives. So let us move to the next question, which is the exotic moment that the poet refers to in Keeping Quiet. The poet refers to the moment of stillness and quietness as an exotic moment. We have discussed these lines and these points in the focus points also. It would be an exotic moment, such As such, a tranquility or as such, these tranquil moments will initiate peace and brotherhood. There would be no movement, no talking, no activity, and consequently, no violence. So it will be a state of bliss, or you can say blissful state. What is the sadness that the poet refers to? We have already discussed. The poet here refers to the sadness which surrounds us or surrounds man due to not having any time for himself. The pain of not understanding himself or herself and keeping himself always busy what he or his fellow human beings want. He is busy in doing those things what others want him to do, not what he wants from himself or herself. He has no time for introspection. Dear students, you need to learn this word, that what does the poet wants from the readers? He wants them to do introspection. As a result, he is unable to analyze his own actions and understands its consequences. When he doesn't introspect, he doesn't understand himself. And when he doesn't understand himself, he's in a painful state and he has to bear the consequences. So, hence, it is very imperative, according to the poet, a suggestion for the readers through these lines that one must spend some time in tranquility and quietude to bring huge peace in one's life, right? Which images in the poem Keeping Quiet show that the poet condemns violence? The images of fishermen not harming the whales in the sea, harming the whales in the sea, and wars leaving behind no survivors to celebrate the victory. Wars are situations where whosoever may win, but there will be losers both the sides. So, victory without survivors, right? So, the image of fishermen harming the whales in the sea and wars leaving behind no survivors. To celebrate the victory, show that the poet condemns violence. He doesn't want any sort of violence, whether it is done to the human race or to the environment. The poet wants the warmongers to change their blood-stained clothes and wear clean clothes along with their brothers. Yesterday, when we were discussing the poem, we discussed that there are two groups of people, one who are involved in all these violent activities and the other ones, those who are initiating peace and harmony. So all these brothers will wear clean clothes and join hands to join their brothers, those who are involved in good deeds. So the poet's refusal to have any association or dealing with death also shows that he's not in favor of any form of violence, right? What symbol from nature does the poet use to prove that keeping quiet is not total inactivity? When he says, I don't want any truck with death or association with, what I mean should not be associated. And then he teaches the example or gives the example of earth, which appears to be silent. So we can use these lines for reference. The poet uses nature as a symbol to explain his idea that there can be life under stillness, under utter stillness. According to him, keeping quiet is not total inactivity. A seed may appear to be dead and inactive for many days inside the soil or earth, but one day the same seed may turn into a fruitful tree, right? So, how, according to Neruda, can keeping quiet change our attitude to life? We have discussed time and again, we have repeated these things, and we have time and again here means that we have learned since childhood also, silence is golden, right? And it is good to keep silent sometimes. And how, according to Neruda, can keeping quiet change our attitude to life? Keeping quiet and suspending all our activities for a brief moment, we will give us time to introspect and analyze our own actions. We will develop a new understanding of our surroundings, because for that we need to spend time with ourselves. And this spending time with oneself in peace and tranquility and in harmony with oneself is actually the right attitude to life, as suggested by the poet. So we will check our destructive ways, and then only we'll get a good quality time to check our destructive ways and dark ways and try to be more positive and constructive. So how, according to Neruda, can keeping quiet change our attitude to life? It will make us from destructive to constructive. And if we are not destructive, and we'll move towards more construction, rather getting distracted. What are the different kinds of wars mentioned in the poem? What is Neruda's attitude towards these wars? The poet has written about the wars against humanity and nature, green wars, wars with poisonous gases, wars with fire are the different kinds of wars mentioned in the poem. Wars do good to no one. We have already discussed, Pablo Neruda feels that such wars may bring victory, but there are no survivors. It means that there is heavy loss on both the sides. Right? I hope this question is clear. How can suspension of activities help? The poet believes that suspension of activities, now suspension here means to leave for some time, to relieve oneself from keeping oneself moving and rushing. So suspension of activities will allow man to introspect, which can help them in analyzing their own actions and solving many of their problems based on any problem, any type of problem. So it will help them develop a new understanding of their surroundings and thus making them do amendments and mend their destructive ways. Right? Now, this is again, do you think the poet advocates total inactivity? We have already done. According to the poet, what is that human beings learn from nature? They must learn that in stillness, there may be stillness on the surface, which man can learn from nature and especially earth. But the earth is never in the state of total inactivity. Nature carries on its work always without any fail. Winter is associated with inactivity, but winter is not the permanent situation of the earth. And so after winter comes the wonderful season of spring also. What will counting up to 12 and keeping quiet help us achieve? Again, it's a repetitive question. It will give us time to think about ourselves. That silent and motionless situation will give us time to introspect and think about our brothers, think about our wrong deeds so that we can walk together in harmony for the survival of humanity, which is going to be an achievement. It will also give us um, one chance to analyze our actions what consequences they'll bear. So I have repeated the points again and again for you people to understand. So this is one extract, one or two examples of extracts we'll share. If we were not so single-minded, what does the poet mean by this? That if we were not so single-minded. While explaining the poem, I explained you that single-minded means what others are doing, we follow that. And we all single-mindedly keep rushing in achieving our material pursuits. Now, material pursuits here means we want so many things in the luxuries, in the form of our accomplishments and all, but they are not capable enough in giving us a real happiness, right? So if we were not so single-minded about keeping our lives moving, for once could do nothing, perhaps a huge silence might interrupt this sadness of never understanding ourselves. Now let us go through the questions, and the moment we'll read the questions, the answers will come up in our mind. Whom does we refer to in the above lines? We refers to the human beings. We people means we human beings. Why does the poet wants us to do nothing for once? So that we can get time, we can get that particular exciting moment of quietude, so that we can look into ourselves and find out what wrong we have been doing and what wrong we might do in the future also, to introspect. The key phrase would be, what does the poet wants us to do? The poet wants us to introspect and analyze our actions. What is the sadness that the poet refers to? The sadness of our own actions and deeds. The sadness that we don't give ourselves the time to understand whether we are wrong or right. We just keep on moving and moving. So the poet here refers to the sadness which arises due to the fact that people fail to understand themselves. They have no time to introspect about their actions and their consequences. So time and again and again we are repeating the phrases so that you can learn. How can this huge silence do good to us? Again, this huge silence will bring, very importantly, togetherness, because everyone, when they'll count up to 12, they'll get some moments to introspect. And when huge introspection will take place on the face of earth, there will be some understanding towards peace will take place, and we will achieve peace in this silence, right? Fine. So perhaps the earth, these are very beautiful lines of the poem. Read the extract and answer the questions that follow. Perhaps the earth can teach us as when everything seems dead and later proves to be alive. Now I'll count up to 12 and you keep quiet and I will go. So what does the earth teach us? The earth teaches us how new life springs from dead remains and how there is life under stillness, under silence, right? Now, what is the significance of keeping quiet? The same, that keeping quiet, the title of the poem is Keeping Quiet. And this keeping quiet will give us a chance to introspect in that particular silent moment. What will keeping quiet help us achieve? So same question, how does the earth teach us that there is activity even in apparent stillness? The earth is always alive. When everything seems dead, there is always some activity going on in nature beneath that apparent stillness, right? Dear students, we have completed the reading of the poem, the question answers of the poem, and now it is time to cover up few figures of speech, right? Yes. Now, let us move. We have already done the introduction of the poet, Pablo Neruda, who belongs to Chile, right? And he is a poet, diplomat, and politician. He won the Nobel Prize for Literature in the year 1971. And he used to write in green ink. He wrote in green ink, which was his personal symbol for desire and hope, right? And his writings are simple, wherein lies their beauty. Originally written in Spanish, the essence of this poem is based on introspection and retrospection. Now, introspection, looking into yourself, deep inward self-examination, and retrospection, going through the past memory lanes and finding out yourself more clearly and understanding yourself. The poet feels that some soul searching is needed for us to be at peace with ourselves and others. Now, this also we have already done. Let us move quickly to the figures of speech. This is the poem that we have read, and we can read once quickly for the sake of learning. Now, we'll count to 12 and we will all keep still. For once on the face of the earth, let's not speak in any language. Let's stop for 1 second and not move our arms so much. Dear students, let me tell you these two lines where let's not speak in any language and let's stop for 1 second. You can note down in your book with a pencil that this is the beautiful example of anaphora, a figure of speech where the repetition of particular words or phrase in the beginning to emphasize some point is given, right? So let us move to the second stanza. It would be an exotic moment, without rush, without engines. We would all be together in a sudden strangeness. Fishermen in the cold sea would not harm whales, and the man gathering salt would look at it hurt hands. Those who prepare green wars, wars with gas, wars with fire, victory with no survivors, they all would put on clean clothes and walk about with their brothers in shade doing nothing. Fourth stanza. What I want should not be confused with total inactivity. Life is what it is about. I want no truck with death. If we were not so single-minded about keeping our lives moving, and for once could perhaps a huge silence might interrupt this sadness of never understanding ourselves and of threatening ourselves with death. And the fifth stanza, perhaps the earth can teach us as when everything seems dead and latter proves to be alive. Now I'll count up to 12 and you keep quiet and I will go. So let us move to the literary devices. And let me explain you in the first stanza, assonance. Use of vowel sound. Vowel sound is repeated. Now we will count to 12 and not move our arms so much. You can practice this line by loud reading and you can understand what is assonance. When consonant sounds are repeated, it is alliteration. Furrow followed free. Waging war. Right? uh, any other example that we have done for alliteration, but you need to remember in mind that alliteration is repetition of consonant sound and assonance is repetition of vowel sound. Anaphora, I have already explained you in the first stanza. Let's not speak in any language. Let's stop for 1 second. The repetition, the consecutive use of this word, or in consecutive lines, the use of let's is an example of anaphora. Right? So, assonance, now we'll count to 12 and not move our arms so much. This line is the example of assonance. And alliteration, we will, and this sound is repeated. We will count, we will. So this is we will, W sound is repeated. Now moving on to the next alliteration. We would, again, W sound is repeated. Sudden strangeness, S sound is repeated. And his hurt hands. H sound is repeated, so alliteration. Moving on to the third stanza, wars with. So wars with, W sound is repeated, alliteration. Clean clothes. Again, example of repetition of consonant sounds or consonant C. Then again, assonance, use of vowel, victory with no survivors. Victory with no survivors. So O vowel is sound is repeated. And right, let's move on to the fourth stanza, alliteration. We were so single-minded. We were so single, right? And then enjambment. You can understand the meaning of enjambment when a line in a poem starts from one line and it is left incomplete by the poet and it is completed, or the meaning, for the meaning we need to move to the next line and next to next line. So this type of writing is known as enjambment. So and for once itself is not complete, but when we read it with the help of the next line, and for once could perhaps, so this could is added in the next line, not in this first line or here in this line. This is enjambment when they are left incomplete and the meaning goes to the next lines and may even to the next to next line. So and for once could perhaps, a huge, so this is left here, and then huge silence, the word silence is in the next line. This is figure of speech or literary device used is enjambment. Now moving on to the fifth stanza, earth is the beautiful example of symbol, right? That teaches us, so earth is symbolic of activity or symbol of activity, right? Rhyming scheme of the poem, there is no rhyming scheme, it's a free verse. It does not follow any rhyme scheme, right? I hope you have understood, right? So we have done the reading of the poem, recapitulation, figures of speech, question answers. So now dear students, kindly write the summary of the poem and the question answers in your notebook. God bless you all. Thank you so much.